My name is Jürg Forster, and I'm the director of the School Psychology Services of the city of Zurich. This is the biggest city of Switzerland, but we have only 500,000 of inhabitants, so compared to Sao Paulo, I live in a village, actually. In the past 20 years, I had many opportunities to meet with colleagues who practice as educational psychologists in different European countries. So in my contribution today, I will first speak about the situation of educational psychology in Spain and in France and in Germany, and I will then focus on school psychology in Switzerland. That's what I know best because I work there. Switzerland, you may know, is a country where Piaget used to work, where Jean-Jacques Rousseau used to live, but also it's the country where Ritalin was discovered in the 1940s in our pharmaceutical industries. So we have a bit of everything in Switzerland. You need maybe earphones. If you don't understand, please feel free to get some earphones. I will speak for half an hour. Right. When I speak of educational psychology, I also use the term school psychology as a synonym. Educational psychology is the term that is more used in Spain and in Portugal and also in the United Kingdom, in England. But school psychology is more used in other countries of Europe and in the United States of America. When I speak of school children or pupils, I also use the term students, even when I speak about younger children. Public policy will be an important topic of my contribution, since our functions and our activities as school psychologists are very much influenced by the public policies, by the decisions of governments, by the legislations in the districts and in the countries where we live. Now, let me first say, oh, please, I need this. Now, let me first say a word about psychology associations in Europe. There are 46 countries on the European continent, from Iceland to Cyprus and from Portugal to Russia. Not all of these countries belong to the European Union, but almost all of them have a national psychology association that is a member of EFPA, of the European Federation of Psychologists Associations. This is an umbrella association that unites about 300,000 European psychologists. So this is quite impressive. These 300,000 European psychologists, these are practitioners and they are also scholars, and they have many common interests that EFPA is promoting. A major, oops, oh, I have to point here, right. A major achievement of EFPA is the European Certificate in Psychology, the EuroPsy. This is a qualification standard that helps the public to identify competent psychologists. The EuroPsy requires a university training in psychology of at least 5 years and at least 1 year of supervised practice. All certificate holders have signed a statement that they will act according to the ethical guidelines of the Federation. One aim of the EuroSci is to facilitate mobility between European countries, so that someone who holds this certificate can practice it in a different European country if this country recognizes the standard of the EuroSci as an equivalent to the national training standards. Let us turn to Spain. As you may know, the economic situation in Spain is very difficult. Especially among young people, unemployment is extremely high. Many educational psychologists are trained at Spanish universities, but the number of those who find a job in a school is very limited. In the schools, the position is not called psicólogo educativo, but rather orientador educativo. Orientadores educativos fulfill a similar function as school psychologists. They also mainly do consultation with students and the school staff. Unfortunately, for working as an orientador escolar or orientador educativo, a training in psychology is not required. So many of these are just ordinary school teachers with some knowledge in psychology. Their training does not allow them to conduct psychoeducational assessments with children who have special educational needs. This is not only a problem for the many unemployed school psychologists, but of course it is a problem for the school children. They lack the support that only qualified educational psychologists can provide. The need to employ educational psychologists in Spanish primary and secondary schools became more and more evident. 5 years ago, an initiative was launched with the aim to convince the Ministry of Education of the need to establish the role of the educational psychologist in the schools. Delegates of national and of Catholic parents' associations came together with delegates of the school principals associations and of training programs of school psychology in Spanish universities. They came together to sign an agreement. This agreement urgently claimed the employment of educational psychologists in Spanish schools. The aim is not achieved yet, but to join forces with parents' organizations was an excellent way for Spanish educational psychologists to increase their visibility and to demonstrate that a change is badly needed. On the picture, you see the meeting of these delegates who signed this agreement. Also in France, there has been recently a development that was very positive for educational psychologists. In this country, all our colleagues who work in public schools need to be trained as teachers, and they are also employed as teachers. Salaries are rather low, and the profession is poorly regulated. The French Association of Educational Psychologists who work in the public school system, AFPEN, has advocated for the establishment of school psychology as a recognized profession in the public schools. In June 2013, a law that mentions school psychologists as members of multidisciplinary teams that serve the schools has been passed by the French Parliament. On the slide, you see a short version of this text in English. I think it is very close to what you are fighting for now. The bill that has just been mentioned by Professor Marilda, that is in the debate now in your parliament, is very similar to that one. Huh? So the French colleagues have successfully convinced the delegates of the parliament to write this down in an annex of the law. And the school psychologist is now mentioned as a member of a multidisciplinary team that serves the schools together with other specialists. This is the law, Refondation de l'École de la République. That's the name of the law. If you want to look it up online, you find an annex to this law, and you may find the text. Otherwise, I can help you. In Germany, school psychologists often practice as consultants to school principals and to the policymakers in the school districts and in ministries of education. Partly, this way of working has to do with a systemic approach that is very popular among psychologists who work in German-speaking countries. However, it is also due to the very high ratio of students per school psychologist. Germany is a federation of 16 states, as you have, I think, 27 in Brazil, right? So in Germany, they have 16 states. Some of them employ hardly any psychologists in the schools, and others employ more. A main goal of our colleagues in Germany is to convince the Ministry of Education to create more positions for school psychologists in the schools. But when the ministry does not act, the parliament has the power to intervene. And this happened after a tragic event 6 years ago. After a school shooting with many victims, the number of school psychologists in the state of Baden-Württemberg was increased from 100 to 185. So it was an impressive increase by 85% after this school shooting. Of course, it's tragic when something like this has to happen until politicians understand what is needed in the schools. I remember another example in my hometown in Zurich, where a member of the parliament carried a motion that 6 additional positions should be created for school psychologists in our town. I was, of course, very glad when she did that. I called this lady the other day. I did not know her. I thanked her for this very successful move, and I asked her why she had done this. And she said, well, when I was a child, I would not dare to speak at school. I was very anxious. But an educational psychologist helped me to overcome my fears. And so I could make friends again at school. And I'm convinced that more school psychologists can do a lot of good to our school children. So this story, of course, was very moving. But what can we learn of this story? Is there anything we can learn from it? Of course, we can always hope for an unexpected surprise. And miracles do happen sometimes. But let us be honest, sometimes politicians clearly need to be reminded of what children need, and it is up to us to do this. Here on the slide, you see the ratio of school children per school psychologist in the 16 states of the Federation of Germany. So it's very diverse. For explaining to the public what educational psychologists do and why they are needed in the schools, it is good to speak a clear language and to have useful resources available. In the United States of America, the National Association of School Psychologists, NASP, published a model for comprehensive and integrated school psychological services 5 years ago. It is also called the NASP practice model. This graph shows what kind of services school psychologists deliver to children, to families, and to the schools. This model is one out of 4 professional standards that are used by colleagues in the United States to exemplify what school psychology is all about. Politicians who decide about school laws or about issues that affect the well-being of children need to know what they can expect from school psychologists. And the same is true for parents, for young people, and for the school staff, of course. Such standards serve as guidelines for the profession, and they are an essential means to strengthen its profile. If you're interested in more details, you find them online. The URL is nasponline.org. In Switzerland, 4 national languages are spoken in this small country. School psychology is especially well established in regions where German is the main language. We have a ratio of about 1,500 school children per school psychologist. Public employees, like school psychologists, usually work 42 hours a week and 47 weeks per year, but most work part-time. Most school psychologists conduct assessments. Is that the right one? Most school psychologists conduct assessments and consult with parents in an office that is not located in a school building, but anywhere in the city. It can be in a residential building or even in a former factory. School psychologists often cater to several schools. That's one reason why they are not in one school, because they serve several schools. They frequently go to the classrooms, where they observe tuition and student interactions, and where they consult with the school staff. It is mostly the teacher, with a parent's consent, who refers a child to the school psychologist. But sometimes parents ask themselves for an assessment for their child or for consultation. Prevention, evaluation, and intervention are regarded as the main functions of school psychologists. All the 3 can be individually conducted with students, parents, or school staff, but the school and the family system is always considered as well. Frequent reasons for referrals to the school psychologist are learning difficulties and behavior problems. I guess this is very similar to the situation in Brazil. Many school psychologists practice a problem-solving approach. They prefer to intervene, to give advice, and to see what works best. Others mostly engage in diagnostic testing when they evaluate the situation of a school child. There is quite a diversity of approaches, also depending on the strengths of the individual school psychologist. Most work in teams, and such teams can be called upon when a tragic event happens at school, like the death of a child or of a teacher. So crisis intervention has become a very much appreciated field of activity for many school psychologists in Switzerland. The supervisor of the school psychologist is not the school principal, but rather a member of the educational authority or of the district administration. This way, the recommendations of school psychologists are less likely to be biased in favor of the school. Recommendations should always take into account the situation of the family just as much as the interests of the school. Ideally, school psychologists are not just members of the school staff, but rather seen as independent specialists, as mental health care providers who care and advocate for the best interest of the child. And this is also one reason why our services are often outside of the schools, so we can be unbiased and see the parents and the school staff on neutral ground, I would say. Otherwise, when there is a conflict between parents and school staff, and we are a member of the school staff and work in the schools, parents sometimes say, well, they just defend the interests of the school. So that's why we try to be right between the families and the schools. In the practice of school psychology, legislation plays a decisive role. Let me outline the situation in the region of Zurich, where I practice. Here you see a picture of our town. It's a small city, but a busy one. In the back, you see the mountains with some snow, and we have a lake with lots of drinking water. We are very fortunate. And yes, the FIFA headquarters are also located here. But let us speak about something more delightful. Sepp Blatter doesn't leave Switzerland anymore, but I can tell you we have prisons as well. In Zurich, children in public schools have free access to school psychology services if they are 4 to 16 years of age. The law says that school psychologists provide assessments and consultation. When parents, As educational psychologists, we are used to work in critical contexts. We are called upon when children are bullied in the classroom, when parents don't get along with teachers, when young people feel anxious or lonesome. These are the challenges we have learned to manage. Political disputes, like the struggle for the recognition of our profession, can be more challenging than the situations that I have just mentioned. There are several ways of how we can react to public policies that adversely affect our working conditions. We can see the positive as well as the critical changes as an opportunity to make a difference and to create a better future for our profession. And there is a Chinese proverb It says, when the winds of change blow, some people build walls and others build windmills. So let us be the windmills in the lives of the children and the families that we serve. We have a wonderful profession and we can be proud of it. Our communities need educational psychologists to support students at school, to facilitate their academic development as well as their social and emotional learning. We care about the students' mental health. They have a right to be assisted by competent professionals. Let me finish with a list of 7 ways of how we can promote educational psychology among policymakers. We can advocate for the establishment of training programs at universities. We can organize conferences and publish scientific journals. We need to set up and strengthen professional associations. We should publish standards for ethical and professional practice. TV, print media, internet, social media, and radio can be very helpful means for promoting educational psychology. And let us advocate for a legal regulation of the profession. And last but not least, let us share our knowledge and our experience, not only with the policymakers, but of course with our colleagues in our own countries and worldwide, as we are doing today at this very conference. So thank you very much for your attention.